I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, a place often called the City of Lights or the City that never sleeps. For those who don't know, Las Vegas is famous for the Strip, a long stretch of road bursting with cheap drinks, endless gambling, and over-the-top hotels. Its dazzling lights can be seen from every corner of the valley, drawing tourists from all over the world to a place where you can drink and bet your money away for days on end. You think growing up here would be a non-stop party, and sure, it's a fun place to live, there's always something to do or see. But for us locals, we tend to steer clear of the Strip. There's a whole city beyond that glittering road, one that's surprisingly normal, with schools, gated neighborhoods, and parks. I grew up on the east side of the valley, in an area called Sunrise Mountain. It's not a bad part of town, but it's not exactly upscale either. Over the years, it's aged, but it still holds a certain charm. The higher you drive up toward the mountain, the nicer the homes get, with breathtaking views of the entire valley and its sea of lights. Those spots were where teenagers would sneak off to party and, well, do what teenagers do. Now that you've got a sense of the city, let me tell you where my story begins. I grew up in a Christian household, attending church every Sunday and Wednesday. There were youth group activities, which I think were the church's way of keeping us kids out of trouble. The youth were split into age groups, and I was about 14 or 15 at the time. Growing up in a strict home, I was pretty sheltered in a lot of ways, naive to the world outside my little bubble. This particular day was a Saturday, when we sometimes had morning youth activities. After that day's event, my good friend, let's call her Sarah, and I were standing in the church parking lot, chatting about how we wanted to spend the rest of our day. Sarah lived up toward the mountain, just a few blocks from the church. We'd both ridden our bikes there that morning and decided to ride back to her house for a swim. Tagging along were Sarah's younger sister, Amanda, and Amanda's friend. The four of us started the short ride back, with Amanda and her friend trailing behind on their scooters. Sarah and I were riding side by side at a leisurely pace, slow enough to talk. As we pedaled, Sarah started telling me about an older girl from our church who'd been followed home one night by a baby blue car. She said the car was old, like something from decades ago, and that it had been spotted lurking around the neighborhood. The girl made it home safely, but the story had spread, and everyone was told to keep an eye out for this creepy car. Now, this next part might sound unbelievable, and even I still struggle to wrap my head around it, but it happened exactly as I'm telling it. Right in the middle of Sarah's story, that very car drove past us. Sarah's face went pale as she looked at me and whispered, "That's it. That's the car." The timing was so uncanny that I thought she was joking. I glanced ahead of the car and saw it come to a complete stop right in front of the street we needed to turn onto. An immediate left. That's when the gravity of the situation hit me. We started pedaling as fast as we could, zooming past the car and making the left turn. Sarah looked at me, her voice urgent. "We can't lead it back to my house. It could come back for us." Just then, it dawned on me that Amanda and her friend were still behind us on their scooters. I slowed down to stay with the younger girls, feeling this overwhelming need to protect them. Sarah, meanwhile, spotted a house up ahead that belonged to a family from our church and sped toward it. As I slowed to keep pace with Amanda and her friend, I felt the car creeping closer. I looked back, and it was inches behind me, moving at a crawl, maybe 5 miles an hour. The road was wide enough for it to pass us easily, but it didn't. The driver, a man, gave me the most chilling stare I've ever seen, pure menace in his eyes. My heart was pounding as I urged the girls to head toward the house Sarah was aiming for. "Go ring the doorbell." "Get help," I shouted. Sarah, I assumed, had reached the house by now. The younger girls sprinted toward it, banging on the door and screaming for help. Thankfully, the car kept its focus on me. I was alone now, still pedaling with his car right on my tail. I sped up, my legs burning, until I reached the house. I dropped my bike and ran to the door, where Sarah was already pounding and yelling. No one answered. It seemed like nobody was home. Just then, by some miracle, a man from our church stepped out from the garage on the other side of the house. He saw us and shouted, "Are you girls okay?" We ran toward him, pointing at the car. By this time, it had stopped in the middle of the street, and the driver was just staring at us. From the driveway, which sloped upward, I got a better view inside the car. What I saw next still sends shivers down my spine. The man wasn't alone. In the passenger seat was a dark-haired woman, bent over toward her feet, as if she was hiding. The man locked eyes with our church friend, then made a sharp U-turn and sped off in the direction he'd come from. Rumors later swirled that this couple was known for stalking kids in the neighborhood, following them as they played in the streets. Some said the woman would hide so that when the driver got close enough, she could leap out and grab their target. I never heard anything more about them after that day, and I can only hope the police caught up with them. All I know is I went straight home and told my mom everything. She reacted like any mom would, insisting on driving us everywhere from then on. I parked my bike in the garage and never rode it to church activities again. I try not to dwell on whether that couple ever succeeded in snatching some unsuspecting kid, but if they did, I hope they're locked up for good. My advice? Always be aware of your surroundings, stick together in groups, and let an adult know where you're going. Stay safe out there. Before I dive into this, let me give you a bit of backstory. My sister has been haunted by something, or someone, named Sarah for as long as I can remember. Ever since she was little, this presence has followed her. We don't know who or what Sarah is, or what she wants with my sister. All we know is that she or it spells trouble. I've always been fascinated by hypnosis, and I've successfully hypnotized a few people, including some friends of my sister. It's a fun party trick, a way to peek into someone's mind, like a window into their psyche. But my first real success with hypnosis took a turn I'll never forget, and it still gives me chills to think about. It was just another day, hanging out in the basement of my house with my sister and her friend. I can't recall exactly how it came up, probably boredom, but I suggested trying to hypnotize them. They were game, so I had my sister lie down on the floor in the middle of the room. The basement was cozy, with dim lighting and old furniture, the kind of place where you'd expect nothing more than a lazy afternoon. I guided her into a relaxed state, my voice steady as I led her into hypnosis. Once she was under, I started asking her questions to see what she'd visualize. She described a long white hallway, brightly lit but with no visible source of light. No bulbs, no windows, just an eerie glow. At the far end of the hallway was a single door, standing alone. I asked her to walk toward it and open it. She said she did, and when she stepped through, she found herself in a grassy field. The sky was overcast, heavy with clouds that looked ready to burst with rain. I told her to turn around and look back at the structure she'd walked out of. She described a small wooden cabinet, almost like a wardrobe, far too tiny to contain the long hallway she'd just been in. It was strange, like something out of a dream where proportions don't make sense. I asked her a few more questions, trying to understand the scene. Was the grass wet? Were there any sounds? She said the field was quiet, the air heavy, like before a storm. Then I instructed her to walk around to the other side of the cabinet. She said there was another door there, one that hadn't been visible from inside the hallway. Curious, I asked her to open it. She did, and her voice grew hesitant as she described what she saw. A small, pitch-black room with a single table in the center. Like the hallway, it was lit without any clear source of light. No lamps, no candles, just an unnatural glow. "Do you feel safe entering?" I asked, my voice calm but my curiosity piqued. "No," she replied, her tone sharp with unease. "Okay, close the door then," I said. She paused for a moment before saying, "There's a peephole in the door. Can I look through it?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, what do you see?" There was a long silence, and I glanced at her friend, who was sitting nearby, watching intently. Her friend's eyes were wide, her face pale, and I'm sure mine looked the same. The way my sister said her next two words sent a cold shiver down my spine. "And I," she whispered. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "What does the eye look like?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's green," she said, "with lots of veins." My stomach twisted. "Do you want to open the door again?" I asked, hoping she'd say no. "No," she answered firmly. I was about to guide her back to the hallway, to move away from this unsettling image, when she spoke again, her voice trembling. "The door just opened." I heard it. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what was happening, but the fear in her voice was real. "Wake up," I commanded, my heart racing. My sister's eyes snapped open, and she sat up blinking. "Oh, that was weird," she said, rubbing her eyes. "What happened?" Her friend and I exchanged a glance, both of us shaken, and we recounted everything she described. The hallway, the field, the cabinet, the black room, and that terrifying green eye staring through the peephole. To this day, my sister refuses to let me hypnotize her again, and I can't blame her. She's convinced that the green-eyed thing, whatever it was Sarah, the same Sarah that's been shadowing her since childhood. I'm still not sure if what happened was paranormal, psychological, or some mix of the two. All I know is that it was the first and only time I've ever felt genuinely afraid while hypnotizing someone. The memory of her voice, describing that veined green eye and the door creaking open on its own, still haunts me. It's not just a party trick anymore. 18 months ago, I was on top of the world. I just started a relationship that I'm still happily in today, and I'd been promoted to manager at a restaurant in Denver, Colorado. The new job gave me enough financial freedom to quit my miserable second job, and I was feeling great after making some healthy lifestyle changes. I'd shed a few pounds, my confidence was up, and life felt good. I'd also just moved into a new apartment, which meant I was sorting through my stuff. I ended up with 2 massive IKEA bags full of clothes I didn't want anymore, probably 5 pounds worth, so I decided to donate them to Goodwill. It was a hot summer day, the kind where the sun beats down relentlessly, so I threw on a light sundress and headed out, each bag slung over a shoulder, weighing at least 20 pounds each and bulging at the seams. I was walking down South Broadway, one of the busiest streets in Denver, in the middle of the day, just before summer's peak. The street was alive with people, shoppers, workers, and tourists milling around. My boyfriend and a bunch of my friends worked on this very street, so I felt completely safe. I just turned down Broadway toward the Goodwill drop-off when I felt someone come up behind me and wrap their arms around me in a tight bear hug, pinning my arms to my sides. No words, no warning, just this sudden, forceful grip. At first, my mind tried to make sense of it. I figured it had to be someone I knew, maybe my boyfriend or a friend playing a prank. I waited for a familiar voice to call out my name, to laugh and say, "Gotcha," but there was nothing. Just silence and the awkward, firm hold over my arms and back, the heavy bag still dangling from my shoulders. As the seconds ticked by, I started to notice things that didn't add up. The person was wearing gloves, thick ones, in the middle of summer heat. Their grip was so tight it lifted me slightly off the ground, just enough to drag me backward while their fists pressed hard against my chest, keeping my arms trapped. I tried to lift my arms to break free, but I couldn't move. Then I realized something else. We were alone. The bustling street I'd been on moments ago was suddenly empty. No cars, no pedestrians, just me and this stranger. I felt their sweat through their clothes, heard their heavy breathing close to my ear, and my brain finally snapped out of its confusion. This wasn't a joke. I was in trouble. I know how this sounds, and I've heard all the questions since. Why didn't I scream right away? Why didn't I fight harder? People say they'd have done this or that, but in those moments, your mind is racing, trying to process what's happening. It all unfolded in less than a minute, but it felt like forever. Just as they dragged me back about 4 feet, I found my voice and started screaming. At the same moment, I saw a man in a suit sprinting toward us from a real estate office about 100 yards away, shouting something I couldn't make out. The person holding me let go abruptly, but not before running their gloved hands under my skirt, groping me in a way that made my skin crawl. They bolted toward a car parked about 20 feet away, where the back hatch was already open, like it was ready for me to be shoved inside. There was another person in the driver's seat, and the car had no license plates. The tires screeched as they peeled out, running a red light to disappear around a corner. The man in the suit reached me, breathless, and stayed with me until the police arrived. The cops drove me home to make sure I wasn't followed, and my boyfriend met me there. I broke down, crying in his arms, the weight of what had just happened crashing over me. I learned a hard lesson that day. You can never assume you're safe. Predators don't care if it's broad daylight or a crowded street. They strike when they see an opportunity. I've always been a fan of true crime, reading Reddit scary stories and watching YouTube channels about murders and disappearances, so I know how close I came to becoming one of those stories. Later, I looked online and asked the police if there had been similar attacks. They said there hadn't been any reported, but I found reports of a man bear-hugging women from behind and trying to drag them away in the area. One woman had even been pulled into an apartment lobby before escaping. In the end, I got lucky. That man in the suit saved me, and I'll never forget him. I urge everyone, your sister, your girlfriend, your mom, anyone you care about, to stay alert. I was on the busiest street in Denver, in the middle of the day, in a safe neighborhood, surrounded by people 1 minute and alone with an attacker the next. 2 minutes more, and I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Stay safe out there. This isn't my story, but one from a close family friend, and it's hands down one of the most chilling paranormal tales I've ever heard. It happened about 10 years ago, and even now it gives me goosebumps. Our family friend, a father, had a young son around 5 or 6 years old at the time. For a couple of years, the boy had been talking about seeing what he called dinosaurs or some kind of creatures. He described them as short, scaly, and reptilian in appearance. These sightings happened frequently, and his parents, like most, chalked it up to an active imagination or an imaginary friend face. It seemed harmless, so they didn't think much of it and let it slide. One weekend, the father was helping his sister with a DIY project at her house and brought his son along. The boy was outside playing in the garden, while the adults worked in the kitchen. Everything seemed normal until the boy suddenly burst into the room, gasping for air, unable to breathe. His parents panicked, thinking he was choking on something, but there was nothing around his neck or in his mouth. They frantically tried to help him, checking for obstructions, but nothing worked. His lips started turning blue, and they were seconds away from calling an ambulance when, out of nowhere, he took a massive, gasping breath and began to recover. After a few minutes, he seemed to stabilize, but as he calmed down, a reddish mark slowly appeared around his neck. Over time, it darkened into a distinct band of bruising, like something you'd see on someone who'd been strangled with a rope or cord. It was horrifying to see on a child so young. When they asked him what happened, the boy, still shaken, said he'd been playing outside with the dinosaurs when one of them grabbed him and started strangling him. He described feeling a burning sensation around his neck where the creature held him. The bruising lingered for days before it finally faded, but no logical explanation ever surfaced for what caused it. After that terrifying incident, the boy never mentioned seeing the dinosaurs again, as if whatever had been haunting him had vanished for good. This happened about 4 years ago when I was 16, just a few weeks shy of starting my senior year of high school. My mom and I were on a trip to New Jersey to visit my aunt, who we hadn't seen in a while. We arrived early in the afternoon and had a great time catching up. Everything felt warm and familiar, with nothing out of the ordinary during our visit. By the time we left my aunt's house, it was around 9 p.m. It took us about 20 minutes to get onto the New Jersey Turnpike, a major highway that stretches across the state. About half an hour into our drive, my mom noticed we were running low on gas with only a quarter tank left. She decided to pull off at the next gas station to fill up. In New Jersey, gas stations have attendants who pump the gas for you, so we handed over $20 for the fill-up. While the attendant was working, I asked my mom if I could run into the convenience store to grab a bottle of water. She said sure and gave me a few dollars, asking me to pick up a pack of gum for her too. She mentioned she'd pull the car into the parking lot on the left side of the store once the attendant was done. I headed into the store, grabbed the water and gum, and got in line to check out. The line was longer than I expected, so it took about 5 minutes before I paid and walked out. As I turned right toward where I thought our car would be, I noticed a man standing next to my mom's driver's side window, talking to her. Before I could process it, I heard my mom yell, "Get the hell away from me, you sick creep." My heart raced as I sprinted toward the car, getting right in the guy's face and shouting, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The man looked to be in his late 30s, wearing a Yankees t-shirt and black shorts. He had dark brown eyes, jet black hair, and a scruffy mustache that added to his unsettling appearance. He was thin, maybe 5 feet 7 inches and 130 pounds, and had a sickly, almost gaunt look. He started freaking out, apologizing profusely, saying it was all a misunderstanding and begging for a second chance. I wasn't having it. I screamed at him to get lost before I smashed his face into the pavement. He bolted, running to a black car parked on the other side of the lot, jumped in, and sped off. I got into the car, my hands shaking, and asked my mom what happened. She said the guy had approached her window asking for directions to Jersey City. She answered politely, hoping he'd leave, but he thanked her, smiled, and then said, "You're very beautiful, you know that." My mom, who's dealt with creeps before, had a bad feeling about him from the start. She thanked him curtly, showed him her wedding ring, and said she was married, hoping it would shut him down. Usually that works, but not this time. He started rambling about how she must be in an abusive marriage, claiming he could tell by the look on her face. He said if she gave him a chance, he could treat her right, and then spewed disgusting things about what he wanted to do with her sexually. That's when she screamed at him to get away, just as I came out of the store and scared him off. We pulled out of the gas station, shaken, but trying to put the incident behind us. About half an hour later, though, I glanced in the side mirror and noticed a car tailing us. The highway was well lit, and I recognized it as the same black car the creep had driven off in. My stomach dropped. I told my mom, and she said she'd noticed it following us for the past 10 minutes. She planned to get off at the next exit to lose him. We exited the highway and started making quick turns down side streets, speeding up to shake him. He kept up for about 5 minutes, relentless, until we hit an intersection. The light turned red just as we passed through, and cars started crossing, forcing him to slam on his brakes. My mom seized the chance, speeding up and turning down another block. She pulled into a McDonald's parking lot, parking behind the building to stay out of sight. She turned off the car, and we sat there for 10 minutes, hearts pounding, hoping we'd lost him. Assuming he was gone, my mom started the car and drove toward a road that would take us back to the highway. The street was well lit but mostly empty, with only the occasional car passing by. Not even a minute later, we saw a car speeding toward us in the distance. As it got closer, we realized it was him again. My mom and I were losing it, desperate for this guy to just leave us alone. But then, like a miracle, red and blue lights flashed behind us, and a police siren grew louder. A cop, probably hidden nearby, must have seen the guy speeding and started chasing him. He zoomed past us, the cop in pursuit, likely trying to evade arrest. Relieved, we got back on the highway and continued our drive home. We were both rattled, but after a while, we calmed down, grateful we'd escaped unharmed. The rest of the drive was uneventful, and we made it home safely. Looking back, that night still sends chills down my spine, but I'm just thankful we got away from that creepy man and that nothing worse happened. I live in a small town nestled between 3 slightly larger towns, my house sitting in a valley near a trestle, a railway bridge that connects to all of them depending on which path you take. The valley is pitch black at night, with streetlights few and far between, maybe one every mile. The road near my house has long straightaways, one stretching for about 3 miles, lined with farms. Lately, due to a known drug house nearby, it's not uncommon to see sketchy folks wandering up and down this road at night, adding an uneasy edge to the area. My girlfriend lives in one of the larger towns, about a 25-minute drive from my place. One night, as I was driving to her house, I passed under the trestle and noticed a few cars parked off to the side, near the only streetlight in the area. There were people outside the cars talking, which wasn't unusual, so I didn't think much of it. But on my way back after dropping her off, something caught my eye that I'll never forget. As I came down the off-ramp, I saw one of the cars still there, and propped up against the stop sign was what looked like a person, completely wrapped in a black bag, standing upright. I could see their shoes peeking out, and it seemed like their legs were tied together. The area is secluded, with hardly any traffic, and it's a hot spot for gang activity because it's so hidden. There are only 2 houses nearby, and the trestle offers multiple escape routes, 3 exits you can take almost immediately, a parallel road leading to 4 different towns or the freeway, or the route toward my house with its own branching path through wooded areas or into town. It's the perfect spot for shady business, where someone could slip away before the cops even get close. I didn't stick around. My gut was screaming that whoever had set this up was watching, especially since the person was placed right in the only lit area for miles. The dread hit me hard, like a weight on my chest. I drove past a bend where the trestle was out of sight and called police, not wanting to spook whoever was behind this and risk them taking off with a person, or worse, coming after me for making the call. The police said they'd send someone out, and I kept driving home, my mind racing. But guilt started gnawing at me. I felt ashamed for not staying to keep an eye on things. What if someone came to move that person, and I could have followed them or helped the police? So after a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 at most, I turned around to go back and see it through. When I got there, the bag and the car were gone. Whoever was there had grabbed the person and vanished in the short time I was away. I told the police everything when they arrived, but they didn't seem to take it seriously, saying they'd look into it. I got the sense they never did. Every now and then, I think about who that person was, whether they were still alive, and if I could have done more. The fact that they were left out in the open like that, in plain sight, tells me whoever did it wasn't afraid of being seen. That's what haunts me the most. I hope wherever they are, they're okay. This happened when I was 28 and my daughter was 8. My wife, her mother, was in the hospital with pneumonia, about 2 hours away from our home in rural Kentucky. It was a Friday night, and since my daughter hadn't seen her mom in a few days, we made the trip to the hospital and stayed until visiting hours ended at 9 p.m. It was nearly 10 p.m. when we finally pulled out of the hospital parking lot. Back then, cell phones were a luxury we couldn't afford, and I was driving an old Pontiac Sunfire, a beat-up car that had seen better days. My daughter was in the back, chattering about the handmade card she wanted to make for her mom when we got home. The radio was off, and the mood was light despite the long day. Everything felt okay. Then, about an hour from home, the car stalled out in the middle of nowhere, deep in the hilly back roads of Kentucky. It just died, refusing to start again. I managed to coast it onto the shoulder, told my daughter to lock the doors and not open them for anyone but me. She nodded, hitting the lock button, and I popped the hood to check for any obvious issues. No luck, fuses looked fine, no fuel pressure, nothing I could fix on the spot. It was a lost cause, and we were stuck on a dark, lonely road with no houses for at least a mile and a half. I decided we had to start walking. I hoisted my daughter onto my shoulders, her small hands gripping my head, and we set off down the road, the night swallowing us up except for the faint glow of the stars. We'd been walking for about 10 minutes when headlights appeared behind us. I won't lie, I was relieved when an older couple in a car pulled up beside us. They seemed kind, explaining they lived just a few miles from where I told them we were headed. They'd been at the woman's sister's house for dinner and offered us a ride since it was on their way. Grateful, I accepted, climbing into the back seat with my daughter, her small frame tucked close to me. We rode in silence for a few miles, the hum of the car and the occasional bump in the road the only sounds. The woman started chatting with my daughter, talking about animals and farms, simple, kid-friendly stuff that put her at ease. My daughter giggled, answering questions about her favorite animals. But then I noticed something off. The old man driving kept glancing at my daughter in the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering too long. A chill ran through me. I shifted in my seat, pulling her closer and moving her to my other side, next to the rear passenger door, away from his line of sight. He gave a small, awkward laugh, but didn't say anything. The woman kept talking, but I caught her looking back, not at me, but at my daughter, her gaze fixed in a way that made my skin crawl. By now, we were just a few blocks from home, and every instinct screamed to get out. I told them to stop the car, saying we'd walk to my brother's house nearby. I don't have a brother, but I squeezed my daughter's hand to keep her quiet before she could say anything. The man argued, his tone sharp, almost offended. "The girl wants to stay with us," he said, "but you can get out." My blood boiled, fear and anger mixing into something fierce. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm, and told him to stop the damn car right now, or I'd rip his face off and shove it down his throat. He stopped abruptly, tires screeching. As we climbed out, the woman turned to my daughter with a sickly sweet smile, saying, "Remember, sweetie, you can come play with my horses anytime." Then she hissed at the man, her voice muffled as I slammed the door. "What did you do?" "We were almost there." "Did you see her?" "What's wrong with you?" We hurried to the first house with lights on, my daughter clinging to my hand. I called the police, gave a report, and they drove us home. A few days later, I drove by the address the couple had mentioned. The house was empty, windows dark, looking like it hadn't been lived in for years. I still check in with the county sheriff every now and then, hoping they found something, but they never have. The memory of that night still haunts me. The way they looked at my daughter, the eerie emptiness of that house. I don't know what they wanted, but I know we got out just in time. When I was in 4th grade, my family lived in a small condo in Denver, Colorado, close to my school. My younger brother, who was in kindergarten at the time, and I had a short walk to get home, just across the street and through a couple of apartment buildings to reach the football field next to our school. It was a quick, safe trip we made every day. Our mom was taking night classes at a local university, so she was often gone in the evenings. Her boyfriend, who lived with us, usually watched us after work, but he didn't get home until around 6:30 p.m. This meant my brother and I were latchkey kids, left on our own for a few hours after school. It wasn't a big deal. We were used to it and knew how to handle ourselves. One afternoon, my brother and I were walking home together as usual. We just stepped into the street in front of our condo when a car pulled up right in front of us. The man driving didn't look like your typical creep. He was maybe in his late 20s, clean-cut, dressed in a sharp outfit that seemed out of place for our modest neighborhood. He was driving a fancy car, a Mercedes, I think, which stood out even more. Looking back, his polished appearance and expensive car felt oddly mismatched with the area, like he didn't belong. He leaned out the window and asked, "Are your parents home?" My stranger danger instincts kicked in immediately, a gut feeling screaming that something was off. I glanced at our apartment across the street, then back at him, and in the most defiant tone I could muster, I said, "Why does it matter?" He brushed it off, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Are they home?" He pressed, his eyes scanning us. I knew Mom's boyfriend wouldn't be home for at least 2 hours, but I lied, saying, "Yeah, they're home." I figured it was safer to make him think someone was waiting for us. He wasn't satisfied. "What are they doing?" he asked, his gaze lingering on us in a way that made my skin crawl. I turned to my brother and said firmly, "Let's go." But my brother didn't move. I reached for his hand, and he yanked it away, saying, "No," and looking back at the man. The guy's expression shifted, something cold and unsettling in his eyes, and he said to my brother, "Come closer, I have something for you." His hand reached out through the window, empty, like he was about to grab him. My heart pounded as my brother started walking toward the car door. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my brother's coat and started dragging him toward our apartment as fast as I could. He screamed at me to let go, kicking and protesting, but I was terrified and kept pulling him. The man threw his car into gear and sped off, tires screeching as he peeled out. My heart was racing, my hands shaking, but I got us inside and locked the door. After that, Mom's friends started picking us up from school every day to make sure we got home safely. A public service announcement was sent out to the community, warning parents about suspicious activity in the area. Even now, years later, I still get uneasy when a car slows down near me while I'm walking outside. That moment, that man's face, and the way he looked at my brother, it's burned into my memory, a reminder of how close we came to something awful. This experience from just 2 nights ago is the most unnerving one I've ever had, and it brought back memories of why these kind of encounters feel so creepy and beyond explanation. My husband and I live in Southern California, and we've had hauntings that come and go in both houses we've lived in before. But our new house, where we've been for a year, has been completely quiet. Nothing strange, no eerie feelings, zilch. That changed 2 nights ago. We had just gotten back from visiting family, exhausted from the long day. It was around midnight when we climbed into bed, ready to crash. We settled in, cuddled up, and passed out within minutes. Sometime around 2:15 or 2:20 a.m., I know because I glanced at the clock, I woke up when my husband got up to plug in his phone, realizing he'd forgotten to do it earlier. The brief disturbance left me awake, unable to drift back to sleep right away. He came back to bed, and we resumed cuddling, with me facing away from him, toward the sliding glass doors that lead to our backyard. Our sliding glass doors have blinds and curtains for near-complete darkness, since I sleep best in a pitch-black room. But there's a small sliver of window where the curtains don't quite meet, letting in a faint bit of light from outside. My husband fell back asleep quickly and, after about 10 minutes, rolled over, leaving me staring toward the window. Irritated that I couldn't fall back asleep, I shifted to lie on my back, closing my eyes and trying to relax. It didn't work. I was half dozing, restless. Finally, I rolled back to face the window, still with my eyes closed. When I opened them, I froze. Right at the foot of my bed, blocking the sliver of light from the window, was a shadow, a pitch-black, human-shaped figure so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. My first thought was that my husband had gotten up again and was standing on my side of the bed for some reason. I opened my mouth to ask what he was doing, but then I felt his foot against mine under the covers. My heart stopped. It wasn't him. I stared wide-eyed for what felt like an eternity, but was probably a couple of minutes, my mind racing to make sense of it. Panic surged through me, and without thinking, I yanked the covers over my head, curling up beneath them like a scared kid. I stayed there, heart pounding, for a good 5 minutes, gripped by a dread I'd never felt before. I knew it wasn't an intruder. It felt like something else, something otherworldly. The sheer terror told me to stay hidden, as if pulling the covers over me could protect me. Finally, I mustered the courage to slowly lower the blanket, peeking out. The shadow was gone. The sliver of light from the window was back, unobstructed. I sat up, my hands trembling, and took a sip of water from the glass on my nightstand, trying to calm myself. I knew I had to get up early, so dwelling on it wasn't an option. I lay back down, deliberately facing away from the window, and somehow managed to fall back asleep. The next morning, I told my husband what happened. I explained how I'd never felt panic like that before, how my body instinctively told me to hide under the covers, and how my heart was racing with a dread that whatever it was might still be there when I looked again. It was the most fear-inducing experience I've ever had. I've had other encounters with shadows before, and I'll share those stories another time, but this one, being so recent and so visceral, takes the cake for sheer terror. I've been listening to creepy stories narrated on YouTube for about a year now, and I finally decided it's time to share one of my own. This happened when I was 19, a new mom, and my husband, now my ex, came home from work with my 17-year-old brother in tow. It was past 1 a.m., and they were hungry, wanting to grab some food. I hadn't left the house much in months, cooped up with a baby, so I jumped at the chance to get out. I bundled up my infant son, secured him in his car seat in the rear passenger side, called shotgun, and we piled into the car. My husband drove, and my brother sat in the back next to the baby. We lived in a small town where nothing stays open late, so our only option was a truck stop and gas station a few miles out of town. The building itself was small, but the parking lot was massive, with several 18-wheelers lined up on the far side and a few cars scattered near the front. The lot was dimly lit, with streetlights spaced far apart, casting long shadows over most of the area. We parked in a dark spot on the side of the building, close to the Hardee's entrance inside the station. By the time we arrived, the baby was fast asleep in his car seat, so I told my husband and brother to go in and order food for me. As soon as they left, I locked all the doors, a habit my mom had drilled into me since I was a kid. I'm so grateful for that instinct now. They'd been gone for about 5 minutes, and I was staring straight ahead, listening to the radio softly, when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head and saw a man walking toward our car. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with a mop of curly brown hair poking out from under a red baseball cap. At first, I figured he was just heading to the restaurant entrance, which was only about 20 feet away. I went back to zoning out, but a couple of minutes later, I heard a car door handle jiggle. My heart skipped a beat as I whipped my head around and saw the same man pulling at the handle of the rear door, my baby's door. He tugged at it, then took 2 steps to my door and tried that one too. I frantically double and triple checked that all the doors were locked, my hands shaking. They were secure, thank God. He moved to the other side of the car, trying the handles there as well. I was frozen in fear, my pulse racing as he circled the car 2 more times, methodically checking each handle. I watched him in the mirrors, and he never once looked directly at me, his focus on the doors. I placed my hand on the horn, ready to blare it if he pulled a weapon or tried anything more aggressive. This was the era of flip phones, and not everyone had one. I certainly didn't, so calling for help wasn't an option. I glanced toward the store, trying to spot my husband or brother through the partially obscured windows and glass door, but I couldn't see them. When I checked the mirrors again to track the man, he was gone. I turned around in my seat, scanning the lot, but there was no sign of him. I assumed he'd given up and left, and my body relaxed slightly, though I stayed on high alert, my eyes darting around the lot. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few more minutes, my husband and brother came out of the restaurant, food bags in hand. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I unlocked the doors for them, and they climbed in. As they settled, my brother casually asked, "Hey, what was that guy doing crouched behind the car?" My pulse spiked again, and I turned to him, wide-eyed. "What do you mean? He's still there?" My brother shook his head, pointing to a car parked in front of the building. "No, when we walked out, he jumped up and ran to that car over there. He's lying flat in the back seat now." My stomach churned. The man hadn't left. He'd been hiding behind our car, waiting. We didn't call the cops, a decision I regret to this day. We were all young, naive, and lacking the life experience to realize how serious this was. If it happened now, I'd dial 911 in a heartbeat to protect others from whatever that creep was planning. I still don't know if he was after me, my baby, or the car itself, but his intentions were clearly no good. I can only hope he never got the chance to hurt anyone else. This happened 10 years ago, right after my parents divorced, when we were in the process of selling our childhood home. My mom had moved across town, and my dad, who traveled for work, was often gone for long stretches, leaving my older brother and me alone at the house. As teenagers, we didn't mind the independence. Despite the upheaval at home, our lives were pretty routine. We both had jobs and were in school, so we came and went at predictable times. Most evenings, we'd hit the gym just outside our neighborhood for a couple of hours. My brother's friend, James, often joined us. One night, my brother James and another friend, Christopher, were hanging out at our house, washing their cars in the driveway to get ready for the weekend. It was dark, so my brother borrowed my car keys to turn on my headlights for better light. When they finished, he asked if I wanted to go to the gym with them, but I wasn't feeling up to it and declined. They headed out, leaving me alone in the house. Before going upstairs to my bedroom to blast some music, I noticed the front door was unlocked, but the back door was locked. It didn't strike me as odd. We lived in a safe, upscale neighborhood surrounded by golf courses and a country club, so I didn't worry much about security. I locked the front door, headed to my room, shut the door, and cranked up the music for about half an hour. Feeling hungry, I went downstairs to grab something to eat. That's when I noticed the front door was locked, which was fine, but then I saw the back door was unlocked. I froze. I knew I hadn't touched the back door, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone was in the house or had been. My brother had left my car keys on the kitchen counter, so I snatched them and bolted out the front door to my car. I jammed the key into the ignition, but the engine wouldn't turn over. My brother had left the headlights on, and the battery was dead. It felt like I was trapped in a horror movie, my heart pounding in my chest. Panicked, I called my brother. He was at the gym, listening to music through his headphones, but thankfully, he answered. "I think someone was in our house," I blurted out, explaining the doors and how I hadn't locked the front or unlocked the back. "Can you please come home?" As I spoke, I saw a man walking quickly from the side yard of our house, holding a small baseball bat. His pace slowed to a casual stroll once he hit the road, like he was trying to act normal. I told my brother, my voice shaking, "I just saw someone." "I recognize him. It's our neighbor." My brother James and Christopher rushed back, arriving about 10 minutes later. I repeated the story, my nerves still frayed. My brother, who's got a hot temper, said, "We're going over to his house." The four of us first checked every room in our house with my dad's gun to make sure no one was still inside. It was clear, so they went to confront the neighbor while I stayed back. When they returned, they told me what happened. They knocked on the neighbor's door, and a woman, his mother, answered, looking like she'd been expecting them. Her son, the guy with the bat, came downstairs, and before my brother could say anything, he shouted, "I didn't break into anybody's house." My brother stayed calm, saying, "We didn't say you did." We just wanted to let you know someone was in our house just now." The mother took a protective but almost submissive stance, saying, "I'm so sorry, it won't happen again, I promise." My brother locked eyes with the son and said firmly, "It better not." Back home, we pieced together what we thought happened. We'd seen this neighbor before, a man in his late 30s or early 40s who lived with his elderly parents. He only seemed to come out at night, walking the neighborhood with his miniature baseball bat, which he claimed was for fending off dogs, according to another neighbor. He often muttered to himself and clearly had some mental health issues. We figured he'd been watching our house, knowing our routine. That night, he might have mistaken Christopher for me, thinking the house was empty when he entered through the unlocked front door. Hearing me upstairs, he likely panicked, slipped out the back door, and hid in the yard until he thought it was safe to leave. We didn't know how long he'd been inside, but I'd been in my room for at least half an hour. We had no idea why he broke in, but we suspected it wasn't his first time. Our teenage imaginations ran wild, wondering if sneaking into empty houses gave him some kind of thrill, like he was stalking people for the rush of it. It seemed like something he couldn't control, and we were sure he'd try it again. The thought that he'd been watching us, waiting for the right moment, still sends chills down my spine. This is a story from my teenage years, back in the mid-90s, when I was about 14 or 15. My family had just moved into what seemed like a cozy, normal house in Savannah, Georgia. There were 4 of us: my parents, my older sister, and me. The house was great at first, spacious, with beautiful hardwood and carpeted floors, and a big backyard that felt perfect for a family like ours. We thought we'd hit the jackpot with this place, but we ended up moving out after just 1 year because of what we experienced there. I'm not the best writer, so bear with me as I try to lay it all out. For the first couple of months, everything was quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. But around 2 or 3 months in, strange things started happening. At first, it was small stuff, items not being where we left them, like keys or books showing up in odd places. Then we began hearing unexplained noises, footsteps echoing through the house at night, knocks on walls or doors with no one there. Eventually, it escalated to seeing actual apparitions, shadowy figures that sent chills down our spines. Before I dive into the scariest night, let me explain the layout of our entertainment room, since it's important to the story. It was on the 2nd floor at the end of the house, with only one doorway leading in and out. To leave, you had to go through that door into a hallway. Turning right took you toward the kitchen and the rest of the house. Turning left led to my parents' bedroom. There was no other way out of that room. One night I'll never forget happened in the summer of 1994, sometime in June. I was up late in the entertainment room, playing Super Mario World on my Super Nintendo, completely absorbed in the game. Out of nowhere, a blast of cold air swept over me, which was odd because it was early summer and our air conditioning wasn't great in that old house. I glanced up from the TV and noticed the door was wide open, even though I clearly remembered shutting it most of the way before starting my game. A shiver ran down my spine, but I gathered my courage, got up and closed the door firmly, making sure it latched. I went back to my game, trying to shake off the unease. Not even 5 minutes later, I heard a rattling sound coming from the door. I looked over just as it flung open with a force that made my heart leap into my throat. The controller slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. I sat there, paralyzed with fear, staring at the open doorway, expecting something or someone to come through. For a good 10 minutes, I didn't move, my eyes locked on the dark hallway, terrified of what might appear. When nothing happened, I summoned every ounce of bravery I had and crept toward the door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. As I reached the doorway, I heard faint footsteps from somewhere else in the house, soft but unmistakable, like someone walking barefoot on the hardwood. My breath caught, and I hesitated, debating whether to check it out. Part of me hoped it was my parents or my sister playing a cruel prank, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Steeling myself, I peeked into the hallway, looking to the right toward the kitchen. What I saw made my blood run cold. A black shapeless mass hovered at the end of the hallway, just floating there. Then it started moving toward me, slow but deliberate. I let out a scream that ripped through the silence and bolted left toward my parents' room, my bare feet slapping against the floor. I burst through their door, waking them instantly, shouting about what I'd just seen. My mom sprang up, her face pale and disturbed, while my dad grumbled but sat up to listen. I glanced back into the hallway, my heart still racing, but the black mass was gone. Nothing was there anymore. My mom, looking shaken, admitted she'd also been experiencing strange things in the house. Objects moving, weird noises, and an overall unsettling feeling that she couldn't shake. My dad, always the skeptic, didn't outright dismiss me, but didn't seem fully convinced either. That night changed me, though. I became determined to capture proof of whatever was haunting our house. After that, I started setting up our family's video camera in the areas where things felt the creepiest or where we'd had incidents. It took time, but I eventually recorded a few chilling moments. I have 3 clips I can share right now showing unexplainable shadows and movements, but I've got more that I still need to transfer to my computer. Those recordings confirmed what I'd felt all along, that something wasn't right in that house. We moved out not long after, unable to stay in a place that felt so wrong. The memory of that night, the open door, the footsteps, and that black mass still haunts me, a reminder of how real those experiences were. I'm a woman in my early 20s, sharing a top-floor flat with a male friend around my age. Our flat's kitchen window sits right above the front door, and we keep all our windows open most of the time. We're both smokers, and it's summer, so the heat makes it unbearable otherwise. One of us is usually home. My 9-to-5 job keeps me around during the day, while he works nights, so leaving the windows open hasn't been an issue. A few weeks ago, my flatmate went away for a few days. That day, he closed the kitchen window, which was rare since it's been open pretty much the entire 6 months we've lived here. That night, I came home drunk and was messing around on my phone on the sofa. I must have passed out because around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a strange scratching noise coming from the kitchen. At the time, I didn't realize someone might have been trying to climb in through the window they expected to be open. Wasted as I was, I stumbled up, flipped on the light to head to the bathroom, and the scratching stopped. I didn't think much of it, used the bathroom, and then heard a louder, more guttural scratching sound. I went back to the kitchen, looked out the window, and saw someone across the street dragging a big step ladder away. Still in a daze and exhausted, I didn't piece it together and just went back to sleep. The next morning, I looked out the kitchen window and noticed a board directly below it, the kind used to safely stand on fragile surfaces, like the roofing over our front door. I called the landlord to ask if there was any maintenance work we hadn't been told about, but he confirmed there was nothing scheduled. I started to wonder if someone had tried to break in that night, but I didn't know if they'd tried again. It wasn't until my flatmate went away again 2 days ago that I noticed the board outside the window was gone. That's when I felt compelled to share this story, the eerie memory creeping back as I realized someone might have been watching our flat, waiting for their chance. I live in a city called Leicester in the UK, but I'm not a big fan of the hustle and bustle of city life. To escape it, I often head out to the quieter villages, parks, and suburbs surrounding the city. One of my favorite spots has always been Swiftland Woods, a dense, sprawling forest that's been a part of my life since I was a kid. It's a place filled with happy memories, long walks, adventures with friends, and a sense of peace away from the crowded streets. That is, until this past summer, when everything changed. It was the summer holidays, and I got a few friends together for a campout in Swiftland Woods. For American readers, think of it like a classic camping trip in a state park, but this was a smaller, local woodland known for its quiet trails and secluded spots. We planned to light a fire, have some laughs, and being typical 16-year-olds, sneak in some drinks. My granddad dropped us off near a water pumping station just outside the back of the woods. We didn't want to go through the main entrance because it would have been obvious we were planning to stay overnight, which wasn't allowed. So we trekked into the woods, hoping to find a footpath to follow. After about an hour of wandering, we still hadn't found a clear path, and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the trees. It was getting dark, so we decided to pick a large enough clearing to set up our tents. We got a fire going, the crackling flames lighting up the small circle of our camp. I've always known Swiftland Woods had its share of spooky stories, mostly about a figure called the Witch of Swiftland. The tales, passed down from my granddad, said she was a woman accused of witchcraft long ago. According to legend, she was subjected to a witch trial where they threw her into the deep part of the stream, running through the woods to see if she'd float, a test to prove she wasn't a witch. She didn't survive, and ever since, strange things have happened in the woods. People have found bodies near the stream with no clear cause of death, and eerie dream catchers made of twigs and string have been spotted hanging high in the trees. I always thought these were just stories my granddad made up to scare me as a kid, but that night I wasn't so sure. As the night grew darker, we sat around the fire, passing around a bottle of cheap vodka we'd bought. The mood was light, filled with jokes and laughter, the kind of carefree vibe you get with close friends. Then one of my friends, Jane, who was facing a boy we called Alex, suddenly froze. The amber glow of the fire lit up our faces, but hers turned as white as paper. "What's wrong, Jane?" I asked, my voice cutting through the chatter. She didn't respond, just stared into the distance. I called her name again, sharper this time. "Jane." She snapped out of it, her eyes wide, and whispered that she'd seen something standing in the distance, but it ran off when she noticed it. She looked shaken, describing it as freakishly tall, a shadowy figure that didn't seem right. We brushed it off, half laughing, blaming the cheap vodka for playing tricks on her eyes. But the mood wasn't quite the same after that. It was around 2:30 a.m. when we decided to call it a night. I was sharing a tent with Alex, since we were the two guys, and it didn't feel right to share with Jane or the other girls. The air was cool, and a light rain started to fall, pattering on the tent before stopping. Inside, Alex and I were chatting about starting college after the summer when, out of nowhere, something hit the back of our tent with a loud thud. We both shot up, hearts racing, and turned toward the sound. We sat there for a minute, frozen, waiting for something else to happen. I called out to the girls in the other tent, and they were awake too, having heard it. We decided to get out of our tents together, safety in numbers, and stepped into the dark clearing. We circled to the back of our tent and found a strange figure made of twigs and string, tied together like a crude stick man, lying on the ground. I picked it up, my hand shaking a little, and brought it back to the fire to get a better look. In the flickering light, it was clear this wasn't some prank. The stick man was eerie, like something out of a horror movie, with knotted string binding the twigs in a way that felt deliberate. We all exchanged looks, the "who did this?" accusations fading fast. This wasn't a game anymore. I didn't feel like sleeping, and neither did Jane, so we decided to stay up and keep the fire going. The others went back to their tents, but the air felt heavier now, the woods quieter than they should have been. Around 4 a.m., Jane suggested we burn the stick man to get rid of it. I tossed it into the fire, watching the flames consume it. The second it started to burn, a low guttural growl came from behind us, so close it felt like it vibrated through the ground. We spun around, and there, about 2 feet from our campsite, stood a massively tall black figure. It was impossibly thin, its outline barely distinguishable against the dark trees, but it was there, looming over us. Jane and I screamed, pure terror taking over, and we bolted, leaving Alex and the other girl behind in their tents. We ran for what felt like 5 minutes, our breaths ragged, branches snapping underfoot. We took a sharp left into a thicker part of the woods, hoping to lose whatever it was. We stopped, crouching in the underbrush, listening for any sign of pursuit. After 10 agonizing minutes of silence, we decided it was gone. Hearts still pounding, we made our way back to the campsite, praying Alex and the other girl were okay. When we got there, they were still asleep, their tents unzipped, which sent a fresh wave of unease through me. The fire was out, reduced to a pile of ash, and lying on top of it was the burned stick man we'd thrown in, along with 3 more just like it. My eyes drifted upward, and I nearly froze again. Hanging from the trees above us were about 20 dead squirrels, tied by their tails with the same string used in the stickmen. Their bodies were fresh, some still dripping, the smell of Raja starting to creep in. That was it. We woke the others, packed up in a panic, and headed straight for the water pumping station where my granddad had dropped us off. We stayed there, shaken, until morning. I haven't set foot in Swiftland Wood since, and I don't plan to. Jane, who's now my best friend, is the only one I've really talked to about this. I know it sounds crazy, but I swear it's true. Those stick men, the figure, the squirrels, it all still haunts me. Whatever was out there that night, I don't want to know what it wanted. In 1986, my parents divorced, and with what little money she had, my mother moved my brother, sister, and me to Fontana, California, about 30 miles from where I'd grown up. For American readers, Fontana is a working-class city in Southern California's Inland Empire, known then for its industrial vibe and sprawling suburbs. We were struggling to make ends meet, barely keeping the lights on, so I took a full-time job at a Jack-in-the-Box about 5 miles from our new home. I was 23, shy, and introverted, not the type to ask for help. Since I couldn't afford a car, I walked to and from work every day, a long trek through the quiet streets of Fontana. It was mid-afternoon on a sunny, beautiful day, with fall just around the corner, but summer's warmth still lingering. I was walking home along a familiar road, the kind of route where you know every crack in the sidewalk. On one side of the road were rows of old, dead grapevines, remnants of the vineyards that once defined the area before it turned into a patchwork of suburbs and industry. On my side, there was an old chicken farm, hidden behind a wall of overgrown oleander bushes that completely obscured the fence and anything, or anyone, behind it. At the end of the road was a small hill, just steep enough to block the view of any cars coming from the intersection beyond it. I was about 100 yards from the hill when a white work truck slowed down to match my pace. The driver, a man, leaned out and asked if I wanted a ride. "No, thank you, I'm almost home," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. I expected him to drive on, but instead, he sped up, pulled ahead, and turned his truck sideways into the dirt, blocking my path. A cold chill ran down my spine, like someone had walked over my grave, a phrase I'd heard before but never truly understood until that moment. My heart started pounding as he got out of the truck. He turned his head, scanning the road, clearly checking to see if we were alone. Then he started walking toward me fast. I froze. My mind screamed that I was in real danger, but my body wouldn't move. I kept thinking. I told him I didn't want a ride, as if that could undo what was happening. Before he could close the distance, a black and white police cruiser roared in between us, tires kicking up dust and gravel. The truck's driver spun on his heels, bolted back to his vehicle, and sped off, the engine roaring as he disappeared down the road. The police officer stepped out and told me to get in the car. "I'll take you home," he said, his voice calm but serious. He mentioned he'd seen me walking earlier and had been keeping an eye out, adding, "You need to be more careful. There've been a lot of abductions around here lately." I hadn't noticed any cars, let alone a police cruiser, on that stretch of road all day, but I was too shaken to question it. Sitting in the back of the cruiser, I stayed quiet. I wondered why he didn't call on the incident or chase the truck, but my shyness kept me from asking. I just wanted to get home. That evening, I told my sister what had happened, my voice trembling as I recounted the truck, the man, and the officer's sudden appearance. She said she'd been worried about me all day, like she'd sensed something was wrong. Maybe she had a gut feeling about the danger I was in. Fast forward 19 years to 2005. I was watching a TV program about serial killers, the kind of true crime show that draws you in with its chilling details. As the episode played, a face flashed on the screen, and my blood ran cold. I recognized him instantly, the man from the truck. His name was James Gregory Marlowe, sometimes called the Folsom Wolf. The program detailed his crimes, and later, I read an article that confirmed it. Marlowe and his girlfriend, Cynthia Kaufman, had been kidnapping women in the area around that time. They worked as a team, and she even had property of the Folsom Wolf tattooed on her back. The show mentioned they'd buried one of their victims in the very vineyard across the street from where I'd been walking that day. As luck would have it, Kaufman wasn't with him that afternoon, but the thought of what could have happened if she had been still haunts me. It gives me shivers to think how close I came to disappearing. My family would have never known what happened to me. I regret not getting the officer's name. I'd love to thank him for saving my life. Looking back, the creepiest part is how my family used to joke about bodies being buried among those old, dead grapevines across the road. We had no idea how close to the truth we were. What haunts me most is the thought that if Kaufman had been in the truck that day, I might have been desperate or naive enough to accept the ride, thinking a woman's presence made it safe. If you think this kind of thing can't happen to you, your daughters, or someone you love, think again. It can happen anywhere, anytime, and I'm living proof of how close it came.